Despite all the much-publicized cuts, NASA is the space agency with the biggest budget by far. But it's certainly not the only successful space organization in the world. Russia's Roscosmos has long stood as NASA's most prominent competitor, followed closely in more recent years by the European Space Agency. Close behind and catching up very quickly, though, are the final three of the world's big six agencies: the China National Space Administration, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and the Indian Space Research Organization. The CNSA, JAXA, and ISRO. ISRO currently has a smaller budget than 5 of those 6 and is only just ahead of Japan. It shouldn't be left behind because if it was, it would suffer in the long term. First on the agenda for ISRO then was developing satellites and designing and building the launch vehicles needed to send those satellites up. The satellites themselves turned out to be much easier and faster to build than most had anticipated. And in 1975, just 6 years after ISRO was born, the first Indian satellite was sent into orbit. It was called Aryabhata and was launched with help from the USSR. It took another 5 years for India to develop a launch vehicle of its own, the SLV-3. But that first satellite was certainly remarkable, and is today held as a breakthrough moment for India in space. Since then, though, ISRO has enjoyed many red-letter days and has broken all kinds of records, especially in recent years. In 2014, its Mangalyaan space probe, a Mars orbiter mission, successfully reached Martian orbit, making ISRO only the 4th agency to put an object into orbit around the red planet, after NASA, the Soviets, and the ESA. More impressively still, ISRO is the only one to have managed that feat on the first attempt. China's CNSA, by comparison, launched the Yanghua-1 probe 2 years before Mangalyaan, but despite the CNSA's far larger budget, that probe failed to even get out of Earth's orbit, let alone into Mars's. Elsewhere, in 2017, ISRO broke the record for the most satellites launched in a single rocket, when it sent 104 into space on PSLV C-37. Again, India had pushed itself to the top table of space. It hasn't all been unbridled success, however. Initially, India had a little less luck with its ongoing Chandrayaan lunar program, for example. The orbiter Chandrayaan-1 lasted just half of its intended mission duration, and the Vikram lander on Chandrayaan-2 mistakenly crashed into the moon rather than soft landing on it to hastily bring that mission to a quick end as well. Even so, ISRO still has a reputation for achieving a far higher success rate compared to other space agencies. Some of this is by design, some is because it's attempting things after other organizations have already honed a method. The Soviet Union, for instance, didn't have a successful Mars mission until Mars 3 in 1971. That was 11 years after its first attempt in 1960, but also 43 years before India's Mangalyaan orbiter. Nevertheless, because ISRO isn't trying to directly compete with Russia or America, and because its budget is smaller than all other major agencies, it has always prioritized being cost-effective and efficient, moving gently through space to ensure as little goes wrong as possible. It may seem like trying to save money is at odds with space exploration, but the results are beginning to speak for themselves. In recent years, ISRO has opened up to working with private space firms. It offers space startups an alternative to the often costly partnerships with American or European agencies. And while some of these startups will inevitably fizzle away, some will continue to grow, and it's ISRO's plan to be right at the heart of it. In 2020, ISRO spent only $1.9 billion on its various initiatives. By contrast, NASA parted with $22 billion, more than 11 times as much. Which isn't to say that NASA's way is the wrong way. It is, after all, still comfortably the world leader when it comes to space travel. But ISRO has still managed to enter the conversation in a big way, even without the big payout. As Sarabhai had hoped, the Indian space program has earned its place on the international stage. And as ISRO's first crewed mission, Gaganyaan, is on track to launch in 2022, all eyes are on India to see whether it will again be successful. But still, there's arguably some distance to go between where it is now and a potential space superpower in the future. If the Gaganyaan mission does go ahead, India will become only the 4th country in the world to send an astronaut into space on a craft they built themselves, after Russia, the US, and China. If that's a measure of becoming a superpower, then India is well on track, and it looks set to reach that milestone very soon, again alongside America, Russia, and China. On the other hand, while there have been more than 100 astronauts aboard the International Space Station since it started hosting crewed missions in the year 2000, not one of those astronauts has been from India. In some ways, ISRO is becoming more and more a mainstay in space, but there are still ways in which it could improve and ways in which it could increase its off-Earth influence.